So today on the Sharon Cliff podcast, we have Christine Corcoran, and she's going to be talking to us all around energetics of money. So Christine, if you can let all the listeners know who you are and what it is that you do.
Thanks so much for having me, Sharon. I really appreciate you inviting me on the podcast. I love that our journey this is not the beginning. We've known each other for a little while now, and you know my work so well. So that's amazing that we can have such a great conversation about this today. So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Christine Corcoran. I'm a business mindset coach, and I love to work with women who are wanting to up level and to go to that next level of success in their business, and they feel like they're getting in their own way. So if they're self-sabotaging, if they're struggling with the imposter syndrome, if they're blocking their own abundance by blocking they're blocking their money from coming in to their business through self-sabotage or through all different forms of the ways that we don't charge what we're worth, we're talking people out of working with us. Like, there's so many things that we do as a woman in business that I love to actually unpack the root cause of why we do that and help you shift it on an energetic level, so then you no longer feel that your behavior is being driven by that wound or by that belief system. And so I love to work with upgrading the blueprint that we're currently running to now step into that next version of you, so then you can start to thrive.
Yeah, I love that. And yeah, Christine and I, we've sort of been connected for, I think we were saying about 18 months to 2 years. I went to a networking event where I hadn't been to networking events for years, popped up in one and was sort of working my way through the room and saw Christine over in the corner talking, and she was talking about a business retreat, and I was like, ooh, wouldn't mind going to that. And then I listened to what it was about, and I went straight home that night and signed up, and it's the first business retreat I've ever done. And I went sort of searching for answers, and honestly, within the first 20 minutes, exactly what I was looking for, Christine delivered. So I've been to lots of Christine's in-person events and online events, and honestly, she's always got some amazing aha moments and so much value with everything she does. So she's amazing. So I'm so excited to have her on here today. So thank you so much. For our listeners, we're all at that point now after the last couple of years of, probably not sort of being stagnant, but, we've all had to reframe what we're doing, or we've had to pivot, even though I don't want to use the word pivot, and I guess where, some people have thrived and some people haven't. And I think we're all at that point now, this time of year, where we really want to up level. And I hear a lot of people at the moment think, really positive energy and a positive mindset, and they are really keen to up level. So I know that, you talk a lot around up leveling. So if someone wants to up level their money mindset, what is the first thing they should do? So, obviously we've got a lot going on. If there's one thing that we can do, because I know you work on a lot of different things with your clients, if there's one thing that we can do, what would that be?
I think the most powerful thing you could start doing is starting to notice and bring awareness to the abundance that you already have, and work on appreciating what you do have, because what you appreciate appreciates, right? So often we get caught up in a deep scarcity mindset, and we're so noticing of things that aren't working or what's lacking in our lives or in our businesses, that we are so focused on that. And where your focus goes, your energy goes, right? So I think that the biggest thing you can do is actually start to notice what's already available to you, what's already coming your way. And when you start to have gratitude, and I mean, like, not just acknowledge it, like not just go, because I think that sometimes when we talk about like a gratitude process or practice, people get so caught up in going, yeah, well, I wrote down the 3 things I was grateful for and nothing changed, right? Whereas you need to actually feel it.
Yeah.
For it to make a difference. So taking a moment to actually acknowledge, yes, that abundance came my way. And I mean in all forms. I mean in people coming into your life, opportunities. It could be some help, right? It could be money. It could be things that people are gifting you. It could be energy. It could be time. Like, there's so many different forms of abundance that if we actually just take the time to acknowledge and have gratitude for it, that's actually how we attract more of it. So that would probably be my most important first step. And I feel like I was actually having a conversation with a one-on-one client of mine this morning, and she's like, we've been working through some money mindset stuff recently, and she came up with this insight that she had this morning, and she's like, I sent out an invoice for a new client, and I sent out $550 was the invoice, right? And this lady, she took it and she paid it, which was amazing. So the abundance came in, but then automatically I got a bill that came in for 500. So she's like, that actually reinforced my belief that as it comes in, it goes out, right? It's always going out. And I said to her, well, could it also be true that anytime you need it, it shows up for you?
Absolutely.
And she was like, oh, well, I don't know. And this is the awkward or the uncomfortable feeling of shifting from that scarcity to, because sometimes the scarcity mindset actually supports us in staying in the victim or staying in a place where we feel safe and comfortable, right? So shifting into an abundance and actually starting to believe that we're always supported and that there's so much abundance available to us, that feels like different and scary, right?
Yeah.
So I challenged her on the thought of like, well, wouldn't it also be true that every time that you've needed it in the past, it's shown up for you? And she was like, oh, okay, yes. She was kind of annoyed with me. And I was like, well, why don't you just spend just a week, trying on that thought, right? Trying on that belief that every time you need it, it shows up for you. Just try it, because we are literally walking around this world with rose-colored glasses of the belief systems that we hold on to. So she's walking around with the belief that every time it comes in, it goes out. And so she was recognizing the lack. She was noticing the lack. So the universe will then show you more of that. So everything else in the world showed her lack of support, lack of friendships, lack of love, like all of these things that started to show up in other areas of her life was just proving to her that that belief was true. But we need to shift the belief, because what you believe, you see,
Yeah.
right? So if you want to see abundance, if you want to have more, then we need to start to believe that that's possible.
Yeah. And it's
So
just
yeah, I
reframing,
appreciate
like,
what, yeah.
as you said, if you're going to go and think of everything from that scarcity mindset, then you're blocking the abundance. So, and then the same with, when you touched on gratitude there, it's no good just to go, I'm grateful for this, I'm grateful for that, and write it down. You've really got to feel it, feel how that feels, but also lean into it as well. Because that's a really powerful energy shift as well, when you really lean into that gratitude.
Absolutely.
So when we're talking about, and just then you touched on energy, and I'm really passionate about energy. It's the thing I talk about all the time, and it's the number one thing that comes up. Everyone says, oh, your energy is just amazing. And that's the whole reason I switched into coaching, because when I was doing consulting, I switched into coaching, my energy just shifted. And so I'm big on energy. And I think that in life and business, we don't always step into our true energy. And I know you've got a program running where you talk about energetics of money. And so you've just spoken about a shift that you've had with a client. What do we need to shift our energy around money? What do we need to do?
So I believe that everything is energy, and even our thoughts create an energy in our body, right? So we have, and then they obviously create a feeling, and the feeling creates the energy in the body. So I'm sure that if you recognize, like if you have a belief system you're holding on to, you could actually pinpoint in your body where you feel it, and that has either a lightness or a weight. And so what we want to be mindful of is like, yeah, everything that the constant belief systems of thought patterns that we have are holding an energy, and we are projecting that energy out into the world. And so like I was saying before, like we're coloring the world with those belief systems. So if we want to change our energy around money, we've got to start believing something different and start leaning into, like you're saying, like leaning into that gratitude. And because the difference in, like, say, anger and gratitude is a lightness to a heaviness, right? So anger feels much heavier in the body than gratitude. Gratitude feels so good. So it's like, what energy, what actual emotions are you experiencing with money? So every single person that I ever speak to, and we start talking about money, there is a shift in their energy. And you can tell the difference, because some people are really lit up by it. They understand and they trust in the abundance of it. They feel good about money. They may have quite a good money mindset, an abundant money mindset. And then you'll have other people that have had past experiences where money wasn't great, or money was scarce, or it caused fights in the household, or it's always this whole need to prove our worth in order to charge what we're worthy of. And it has this heaviness to it. So I feel like the best way to start shifting your energy around it is deciding to actually focus more on abundance, because there is so much available to us, and scarcity is ingrained in us, right? It's an ingrained belief system, and that is constantly being fed to us through society, through all forms of sales and marketing messaging, through other people around us. Like I was literally, where was I the other day? I think I was at a shop, and oh yeah, I was looking at coffee machines. So I just bought a new coffee machine, and I was chatting to this girl in one of the stores about these coffee machines, and her automatic response was, "Oh, but this one's cheaper. Go for this one because it's cheaper." And I was like, how do you know how much money I have? Like, I actually prefer quality,
Yeah.
and I actually want the top of the range, thanks.
Oh, I'm
Right?
just going
So
to make the perfect coffee. I don't care how much it costs.
exactly. Do you know how important coffee is?
It is. It is. Believe me, I've only had one today and I need another one.
So yeah, so it's like we are constantly being fed that scarcity, and scarcity feels heavy, and it feels draining, and it feels like this weight that we hold on to. And if we're constantly being fed that, the way that we need to shift our energy around money is start to look at the abundance and start to believe that there is actually something else, right? So we've got to reprogram our minds for abundance, because we're always being fed scarcity. So we've got to choose to decide that I'm no longer going to believe that there isn't enough. There is plenty to go around, like plenty. Like Elon Musk just gave $51 billion to support world hunger. Like $51 billion he just had to give. Like, amazing, right? And if you actually looked at how much money is circulating in the world, I don't remember we spoke about this at Rise Up, right? I spoke about how like there's so much money circulating in the world every day. And at the time, it was $19 trillion. I checked it a couple of days ago to talk about it again in my Energetics of Money program, and it had gone to like 71 trillion
Oh,
in 2 years. They are literally printing money every single day. Now, I don't know what that's going to do for our economy, but I'm wanting you to start to think about, well, hang on, there is plenty of abundance available to us, but if we keep believing that there's not enough, that's all we'll see. So we've got to start to shift into an abundance, and that's where gratitude helps, is actually starting to practice abundant feelings in our bodies and start to practice the energy of lightness and energy of abundance.
yeah. And the thing is too, it's a ripple effect. So, that gratitude and abundance, okay, we're talking about money mindset, but it's also the relationships that you have with, friends and family. It's your business, and it affects every part of it. As you said before, like you might have a great partnership with someone, but when money becomes an issue and you start to argue, it affects your relationships. It then could affect your whole family dynamics, or, in your business, if you've got that scarcity mindset and you think, oh, there's not enough, work or clients out there for me. I always throw this back to the hairdressing industry, and fast food. Like when I first moved to Queensland, the suburb that I'm in, there was like 20 hairdressing salons. I'm like, why would we need 20? It's like petrol stations. Like there's at least 10 petrol stations in every suburb at the moment. Like there's 4 being built on one road near here. And, and fast food's the same. You've got how many different chains of fast food in every suburb. And I think if you, with your business, if you think, oh, there's already a business coach out there, or there's already a hairdresser out there, or there's already so many people doing that in my industry, there's not enough room for me. There absolutely is. And you've just proved that with, what is it, 73 trillion, dollars out there circulating. There is enough money and enough business and enough clients out there for everyone. And that, absolutely, I think is a big part of it when we're talking about, our mindset and our energy around money.
Yeah. And I think it's also being mindful of that, scarcity sells. So like that's why like big conglomerations and sales and marketing utilize that messaging that there's not enough, is because it creates urgency in order for you to buy.
Yeah.
Right.
Sure.
So we want to recognize that we're always being conditioned for scarcity. But you know what's interesting though? Like I want you to question it. Like the thoughts and the beliefs that you're having around money, you want to question them, because if they're not serving you, you need to shift them, right? But why aren't we questioning the scarcity, right? So if we question, like if we have a belief that there's not enough, or that there is never enough to go around, or whatever it might be, that's, believing in the lack, do you ever question if there's enough blades of grass? Like, do we ever question, is there enough air for us to breathe? Like, or enough
water.
drops of water in the ocean, right? We don't question those things because we know there is enough. But it's the thing that's actually attached to value. And because it's so attached to our self-worth, it's attached to our need for safety, stability, shelter, and food, like evolutionary needs that we actually, obviously, to survive, we need money to support that piece, right? So it's attached to so many different things in our lives that we've got to learn to actually disconnect from it. Otherwise, we're going to get so caught up in believing in the lack because of the messaging. We need to start to decide that there is plenty to go around. And when we start to color our world with that belief system, so much more abundance comes our way.
Yeah, everything shifts. That's right. Now, I was talking to you before we came on about, I've been doing a lot of work lately around my inner mean girl, and I did 75 hard last year, and it was all about discipline and the inner voice and the inner critic that you've got. And so I'm currently reading Melissa Ambrosini's book around that sort of mean girl. And I was listening to one of your podcasts last week, and on that you were talking about the inner dialogue that we have with ourselves and how the language that we use affects how much money we can make. So I actually wanted to bring that up today because it was a really interesting episode where, because obviously I've been doing a lot around how I talk to myself and the language that I use, and sometimes you pull yourself up and go, I would never speak to someone else like that. Why am I talking to myself like that? And so I wanted to ask you, so how can we be more aware of what language we're using internally, and what can we do to shift that? Because if what we're telling ourselves internally is affecting how much money we're making, again, that links in with that scarcity mindset, but what can we do to actually shift that?
Okay, so the first thing that it's such a good question. It honestly does impact because our thoughts are impacting how we feel, and then our feelings are driving our behavior. So if we're thinking, well, I can't charge that, then what do? We feel inadequate, or we feel not enough, and then we end up undercharging, right? We end up sending that invoice out less than what we would have hoped originally, right? Less than what we're worth. So it actually impacts our behavior, which then obviously impacts our results. The first thing I would suggest is start to pay attention to any interaction that you have with money throughout the day, and start to notice what you're telling yourself when you're doing that. So sometimes you might be at the shops and you look at something and you go, oh, I can't afford that. Or that's a bit expensive, right? Like we start to actually have language around money that it's, we don't have enough, and it's that awareness around it first. Now, a lot of those thought patterns are actually belief systems that we've actually been passed down to us through our older generation. So usually the way that we talk to ourselves, we've learnt before, right? So something we just came up with on that moment. You've repeated it probably many, many times, and it's probably come from your parents' situation. So what I normally like to do is start to, one, address it, bring awareness to it, and see where are the patterns, what are the thoughts that you're thinking consistently. Like you're always telling yourself you can't afford it, you're always telling yourself that it's too expensive, and start to actually use language that's much more empowering, that supports and actually focuses on the facts, right? Because language like that, there's only so much truth to it, right? Like when you think about okay, I can't afford that, you may be judging that based on the price and your priorities, or what you choose to be spending on that type of item, right? It's not that you can't afford it. You can absolutely afford it. I'm sure you can absolutely afford it, but you're choosing to spend your money elsewhere. So I believe that it's a relationship that you have with money. So you are either speaking about it in kindness and compassion, or you're speaking about it and blaming it for not being around, right? So you can absolutely afford it, but you're choosing to spend it elsewhere. So instead, I will actually say to myself, not yet. Not ready for that yet. So I'm putting it out into the future, or I'm also saying to myself, I'm choosing to spend my money elsewhere, right? Because someone might say to me, oh yeah, but I can't afford it because I've got all of these bills. I'm like, cool. Well, you could choose not to pay your bills. And I'm not condoning that, but you can. It's all a choice, right? You are choosing where you prioritize to spend your money. And if your priority is to pay your mortgage and to pay your bills because that's what's important to you, then you want to honor that. And you want to also acknowledge that the thing that you're looking at buying is not the right price point. Like sometimes I'm super honest with myself and I'll go, you know what? I really value and respect money, and I'm not wasting my money on that because they're asking way too much.
Unless it's a coffee machine.
Yeah. Right? So, unless it's a coffee machine. So, I think it's important that we bring the facts back to it and not just let an old pattern of thought drive how we feel, because what's underlying that, because your belief systems always have an opposite belief system that's deduced in the situation. So, let's say you're shopping and your thought is, well, I can't afford that. Then deduces to be, I don't have enough. Then deduces like, well, am I enough? Right? So it starts to tap into our self-worth, whereas your money is so separate to you as a person. It's got nothing to do with your worth. You are a worthy human being. You were born that way. You are inherently worthy. Money is something that we utilize as a form of energy that we use to exchange for something of value. So you get to choose where you spend that. And I always like to think about it from a respectful place. You don't want to be frivolous. You don't want to be throwing it away. You want to be honoring that energy. The way that it comes in is also the way that you get to send it out. So if we're always circulating it, choose how you want to circulate it. But when it comes to the self-dialogue, it's like, where are you limiting yourself, right? Where are you causing yourself to believe that you're less than or you don't have enough? Is probably the first step, is just having that awareness in the interactions and start to question that thought.
Okay, I love that. And that comes into the next point that I wanted to talk about, that worthy piece, because as women, we actually don't think that we're worthy, and whether that's been something that, you know, has come from, you know, generations before us, or whether there's been something happen in our life where we don't think that we're worthy. And why do you think that is? Because, you know, we've just talked about, you know, the conversation when you're buying something you don't think you're worthy. Why do you think that is more of an issue for women?
I believe that it does definitely have something to do with society's messaging in a woman not being enough. We don't get paid the same. We're not equal to men in regards to that situation. Like, a lot of the time, we're still not being paid the same amount that men are. There's a lot of different language that speaks about women, right? They were always having to fix something, look better, change something in order to be worthy of people's love and attention. But it starts earlier on than that. And I think that, you know, when we come into this world, we're born into this world as this beautiful baby, and we're already worthy. We already have a sense of our self-worth. But honestly, I feel like it gets eroded with different experiences that we have, and the messaging and the conditioning that happen in society. And like, for instance, like on a call that I was on this morning, one of the girls uncovered that she's like, oh, when my parents spoke about money when I was a kid, they actually worked so hard. They were always working, hustling, stressing out about money all the time, that they didn't have enough time to spend with me. And so then I felt that I wasn't worthy of their time. And I was like, oh my God, like my heart bleeds for her, because I'm like, but let's actually look at that. Is that even true? Could it also be true that they were working so hard to put food on the table, to put a roof over your head, to make sure that you had everything you needed for school? So they were doing it for you, but our little brain deduces the belief system that, well, that just means that they don't want to spend time with me. They would rather work than spend time with me. And it's so interesting, because our brains are so malleable at that age that the different experiences affect our sense of worthiness.
Yeah.
And so as an adult, I believe it's our responsibility to start to question these beliefs. And let's not blame parents at all. Like, they did the best they could with what they had, but start to actually choose to go, hang on a minute, why am I believing that I'm not worthy? Who said I'm not worthy? And start to actually unpack what's going on there, because self-worth is a practice. It's honestly what I believe it is, because of the constant conditioning that we have. It's coming back to that practice of choosing to feel worthy and then acting as you're worthy, and developing new belief systems that support your worthiness.
Yeah, and there's a common theme throughout all this. It's stopping and being aware of either, you know, what you're thinking, what you're doing, the action and your thoughts, and then also you choosing. So you choosing to change your thoughts, or you choosing to, you know, have a different belief system. So, like with all the different things we spoke about, there's a common theme there about how you can actually shift. And it's, yes, stopping and being aware, and then, okay, well, what's, you know, what are the thoughts or what are the beliefs that I need to change?
Yeah, what do I want to choose instead? Because you know what a belief is? It's just a thought we've thought many, many times. It's just been repeated so many times that, and then we've then gone out into the world and found evidence. Because remember, we colored ourselves, colored the glasses, and we're seeing the world with that light. And we found all this evidence to prove that to be true. So now it's just like, as an adult, we have the responsibility to question those belief systems and see, are they serving us? And if they're not, choosing to believe something else instead and go find the evidence to prove that to be true, because there's both sides of the story.
Yeah, love
There's
that.
always two sides. And I think that, I feel like sometimes it sounds simple, like, yeah, just become aware of it and change it. It's not necessarily always that simple. I just
No,
want to
because
point.
sometimes it's something that we've done for 10 years or believed for 10 years or 20 years or 30 years, and it's those things take time to change, and as you
Yeah.
say, we're conditioned from so many areas, like, whether it be our parents, whether it be social media, whether it be media, whether it be, who we hang around with. And, a lot of the corporates using that messaging, it just, again, there's the evidence to say, well, that's how it is, when actually it's not. We can choose to change it.
And I like to always pay attention to it too. Like, what am I allowing into my consciousness? Am I consuming stuff that actually is sending me messages that I'm not good enough?
Yeah.
Am I consuming messages that are fearful? Am I consuming messages that are lack and scarcity? Because I literally am choosing not to believe that. So when I see that out in the world, I'm like, nah, that's not for me.
And that's the big thing with social media, is that we are consuming so much more, and we're consuming on all different levels. And I think that we've got to be conscious of that and go, well, you know what, that's not the best kind of messaging that I want to be consuming. It's, and there's a point where you need to go, well, that's not a good medium for me, is that I either need to get off that network, or unfollow that account, or not engage in that, because I think that you've got so much going on, and if you start to go down that rabbit hole, you're starting to believe in that and let those things sway your thoughts, and you go down that negative path. Is that because you've got so much noise. And I think it'd be great if at teenagers at school, if they could have some of these tools, and have someone to go in and say, you need to be aware of what messages, what language you're using, what belief systems you've got, and you've got choices. By the time you get to my age, at mid-40s, and it's like you've got so much to try and undo, and you've got all those habits and all those thought processes that you've had for 10, 20 years, and belief systems that you've then got to try and change. So if any of the listeners, if you've got teenage kids out there like I do, everything that we're talking about today would be great to let them listen to this and go and have a conversation with them as well, so that they're not going through all the same thing that I and my clients, and also your clients, Christina, are going through, that we're having to go and undo a lot of these beliefs and thought systems that we've had. If we had have actually had this knowledge and these tools earlier, to be able to go, well, no, you know what, I am worthy. I can choose the path that I want to take. So I think it's a really great conversation for anyone out there that's got kids to go and have that conversation with them now as well.
Yeah. Can I also point out one thing? That if they're a parent listening to this and going, oh my God, how am I going to stuff up my kids? Like, if I'm handing down some of these belief systems, I want you to know that, one, you can't eradicate like your impact. Like, yes, you can start to change how you think, and then obviously change how you speak about money in the household. I think is a really good place to start, and start speaking in more of an abundant language, and start looking at your belief systems, because you're absolutely handing down those. But even start thinking about how the conversations that are happening in the house about money is a really good place to start too. But be mindful that they're going to have their own experience. Like, everyone is so individual and unique, and how someone takes something from one thing is, you can't control, right? You can't change what they're going to make it mean. So I think it's just being mindful, because I often have like clients that come to me that have kids, and we work through some deep belief systems that they took on board in the most innocent situations in their childhood. That, like, literally, that client this morning, where she's like, my parents worked so hard, they didn't have time for me. And I'm like, but that's okay. Like, you get to work and shift that now. But often, like, if I have a client that has that and they've got kids, they're always like, oh my God, what am I doing to my children?
That's right. And in my family, my dad was like, whenever you bought something, how much was that? How much was that? How much did you buy that for? How much did you sell that for? And then I found myself with my kids doing the same thing. How much was that? How much? And then, I'd say, before they owned their cars and they were earning money, and I'd say, oh, you can't go and buy that, because you've got to pay the car. Once you don't have any debt, then you can go and do that. I'm like, what am I saying? They need to enjoy their lives. Like, yes, okay, they need to pay out that debt, but they also need to enjoy their lives. And the whole thing about money is that money gives you freedom. So whether it's freedom to choose, or whether it's buying you time, because you can outsource someone to do your marketing, or someone to do your washing, or someone to do your cleaning. So for me, money buys time as well. And here I am going and saying to them, I didn't see my dad a lot because he worked a lot when I was younger, and here I am saying to my kids, about their money story. So, and I found that a lot of when I went to that Rise Up conference, is that was some of the stuff that we worked on. So definitely start thinking about it with your kids, about how you talk about money, and the things that you say, and how much they actually listen.
Yeah, and even being mindful of how you're listening to their generation as well, because every generation has different generational blocks around money, right? So, the Gen Ys are going to be different to the boomers because of the experiences that they lived through. So we want to be mindful that we're not also giving them our belief systems based on a past generation, because back in the day, like my parents, they worked extremely hard. And so they developed a belief system that you have to work hard to earn money. They were farmers. And so then I developed that belief system, right? And then I took that into my world. But you know what's so interesting about the world online right now is that you can earn a lot of money doing not much. Like, right? Like if you really wanted to earn money in different ways, like you look at that young kid Ryan who has that YouTube channel, and he's that unboxer, like he loves to just unbox the things. He's a multi-millionaire.
I know. What are we doing? We're in the wrong gig.
Right? Like there are so many different ways to make lots of money. And I think that we've got to be mindful that we're not painting our generation onto the newer generation, because they're not living in the world that we lived in.
Yeah, for sure. That's right. So when it comes to, so I want to bring it back. We were talking about, that's scarcity mindset versus abundant mindset. So what are your 3 top tips for moving from that scarcity mindset over to abundance mindset?
Love it. It's one of my favorite topics to talk about. Okay, so first one I would suggest is what we spoke about before, is finding gratitude and noticing the abundance that's already available to you, and finding gratitude. My second would be to celebrate other people's successes. Right? Like when you start to, again, it's an appreciation of seeing what's available. The universe is always showing you what's possible. And if you're not paying attention, then you're not welcoming it into your existence. So if you're getting caught up in comparison, try to shift it to celebration instead, and acknowledge that person for what they've been able to achieve, and recognize that, hey, the universe is showing you that because it's showing you that this is what's available for you too. So you want to be open to that, right? One of the biggest things that I see that I work with my clients is being open to receiving more. That we're so caught up in the scarcity that we're this tunnel vision of like work, 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 hustle, hustle, hustle. And all this abundance is coming our way. And we're like, no, I haven't worked hard enough yet. Like, get rid of it, right? I'm trying to prove my worth here. And yet when we actually stop and rest and we lean into the feminine side of the business. So I feel like the third tip then would be to actually start to balance the masculine and feminine energies in your business. So the masculine energies are where you need the logic, the structure, the discipline, and the budgeting, like, money management, those types of things. But then the feminine is actually leaning into the rest, the surrender, the receiving, and allowing it to come in, right? So actually being in an abundant energy and knowing that you do not have to prove your worthiness. You do not have to work hard for it. And I'm not saying you don't work, because the masculine is, yes, the work piece. But when you've got a bit of the both, right, you're actually balancing both. One, you don't burn out. Two, you're actually keeping the flow of the circulation of money open, right? When you're only doing one and you're not, like, you're always pushing, it's like an outward, the masculine is like an outward thing of like push, 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 go, 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 sell, 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 right?
Hustle.
But the opposite, hustle, you need to actually open up to receiving it. So I feel like those would be my top 3, would be gratitude, recognize the success and celebrate it, because you're actually celebrating it for yourself as well. And the third would be balance the masculine and feminine energies in your business.
I love them. And just on your second point, before Christine and I actually started recording, she's just had a launch of a program. And the first thing I said to her was, I was so excited when you kept, posting on Instagram about all the different people that had signed up. So it's funny because, at least I know I'm working towards the abundant mindset rather than scarcity, because that was the first thing I said to you. I was so excited with all the people that you had signed up. So it's good. Yeah.
And it's really got to come from a place of absolute unconditional celebration, right? Because if it's coming from a place of, oh, that's amazing, so good, but what about me?
Yeah.
And why does she have it and I can't? And oh, it's okay for her, but not for me. Like, notice the following resistance that happens in your mind. Like, if you're getting caught up in comparison, and or you see someone else achieve something that you want to achieve, and your secondary response to it is, well, that's not, I don't have it. So you're actually focusing too much on the lack
Yeah.
and less on the abundance, right? So one of my biggest lessons in this was actually before I hit 100K in my business. It was something that I was working towards, and I was doing a lot of money mindset work to actually push through it, because I had a real block when it came up to actually hitting that threshold. And we speak about that at Rise Up too, right? Like, actually recognizing where your money thresholds are in your life, because we actually have an energetic thermostat of what we feel safe or comfortable to receive. And so my thermostat at the time was that 100K. So I was doing a lot of work to actually work through that resistance and start to welcome that into my business, and was doing all of the things, right? But it was really fascinating. I had this experience where one of my friends picked me up to go for a walk. We often go for regular walks, and got in the car, and she said to me, "Oh, I forgot to tell you my news. I had some exciting news." And I'm like, "Oh, cool. Tell me what's going on." And she's like, "Oh, I won some money." I'm like, "Oh, really? How?" And she's like, "Oh, through the lottery, of all places. I thought through a scratchy, like not lottery ticket, a scratchy." And I was like, "Oh, amazing." And I said, "How much?" And in my mind, I was like, "Oh, maybe 20K,
Yeah.
because she was so excited." And she was like, "Oh, $100,000.
Oh,
And I was like, "Oh my God, that's amazing." Like, it literally blew my mind. And I was so happy for her in every ounce of like, "Oh my God, that's amazing. That's going to be so good for you." Her partner was going through cancer treatment. Like, I was just like, "Oh, babe, like, this is going to take so much stress off you." I was just so happy for her. And there was no secondary response. And that's when I knew, I was like, "Oh, it's already here. It's on its way. Thank you, universe. Like, thank you for sending me this sign. I know I'm totally supported, and it's on its way. I don't need to worry about it, stress about it, because that's focusing on the lack." And in that moment, like, I remember getting out of the car to go for that walk and just being like, wow, that's like, that's a breakthrough for me, because it had been consistently working on that to get to that stage, because it's not something that just happens overnight. You don't just decide,
no.
"Oh, I'm going to start celebrating people." We actually, which you do, but you want to recognize the secondary response that's happening in your mind.
Yeah, and I've got a similar story myself where, years ago, I'd see someone post about, their new client, or how many coaching programs they'd sold, or what the income was. And I'm like, oh, she's doing that. Why can't I do that? And you'd be all that negative. And now I'm like, yeah, woo, good on her. That's so exciting. Like, and it's just that total shift, because I was that same place where I'd be like, oh, but now it's like, yeah, you celebrate it. Like, good on you. It's
Yeah,
awesome.
that's
So
it. So
yeah, and
good.
that's that whole thing, with not so much, not just the scarcity versus abundance, but it's also supporting other, women in whether it be in your industry or another industry, just really champion other women as well. And that, I'm a big advocate for that as well, because I think that we don't do that enough. We're very quick to, compare or get that imposter syndrome, or to go, oh, and talk other people's, results and that down. But I think that we really need to be supporting each other. I've got a group that I'm in at the moment, and every day we've got this challenge on, and we've got to post what our wins are, and it's just amazing to go, yes, that's awesome, and like, no one's putting anything negative. Like, it's all like, that's great. And because we're having to think every day about what our wins are, you wouldn't necessarily think, oh yeah, that's a win, like, and practice that gratitude. But because we're in a group where we have to post every day, what our wins are, what we're grateful for, it shifts
Right. You
everything.
force yourself to do it. And I think that you force yourself to actually see it, whereas our brains so easily distort it or delete it, that we don't actually recognize that the wins, the celebrations, the acknowledgements, the abundance. And I think that you have to train your brain. And even in like your hardest of days, if you actually take, especially those days, if
Yeah,
you take a moment to go, actually, what was pretty amazing today? Right? Like, or what worked really well, or what abundance came my way anyway. And even if it's something so minute, but when you actually acknowledge it, that's when it starts to appreciate and grow.
that's right. And I'll just share one last thing before we wrap up, is that for the last couple of years, around our dinner table at night time, you've probably heard me talk about this on socials plenty of times, but I've got 4 kids, so there's 6 of us at the table. Generally, we're all at the table together, but doesn't always happen. But what we do is we go around and we say, what did you learn today? And either, you know, what made you laugh or what made you smile? And so it's a great way to finish up the day, because we all talk about what we learn and we share about, you know, what made us smile or what made us happy. And all the way through the day, something happened, you think, oh, I've got to remember that's going to be what made me smile today. Or, you know, we make notes in our phone.
So good.
And we're finding out things about each other, and we're having conversations that we would never normally have had. But it's also just a beautiful way to finish off dinner. So, you know, and then we have, you know, other people come in and sit at our dinner table, and we go around the table and like, wow, this is awesome. So, you know, and then our kids go to other people's houses and they say, oh, this is what we do. And it's, again, that ripple effect. And I just think it's just a beautiful way to finish off the day. Again, weaving back through, you know, that being aware. So throughout the day, you've been aware about, you know, what you're learning and what's making you smile or laugh. So with all the things that we've just spoken about, it's weaving in that awareness and it's weaving in the choice. So yes.
So good.
Christine, thank you so much for coming on today and sharing your wisdom around, you know, money mindset and the energetics of money, and how we can change that inner dialogue with, you know, how we're talking to ourselves, so that you know, we can change that up and we can shift it so that we actually can impact the money that we make, but then also making sure that we're charging what we're worth. And, you know, as you said, when we're born, we are worthy, and it's things that happen, you know, that we're told, that we're conditioned after that makes us feel that we're unworthy. So, and also, you know, obviously changing from that scarcity mindset over to abundance. So hopefully there's been a lot of aha moments in here for everyone listening. I know I've had lots of moments in there. And if you want to reach out to Christine and find out more about any of the topics, I will drop her socials and her website into the link. Yes, her programs are all amazing. I'll vouch for that.
Oh, thank you so much. Really appreciate it. And it's such a fun chat. So thank you so much for having me on.